Hello, everyone, and welcome to Becoming You, the Self-Discovery Podcast. I am your host, Sasha Jackson, and today's episode is going to be a little bit different from our normal. Today, I want to examine influences on self-discovery, specifically traditional versus non-traditional education. The way we're actually going to begin examining this is through two very famous texts. One is Discourse on the Method by René Descartes, and another is Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. For a bit of background, Discourse on the Method focuses on Descartes' self-discovery process with attention paid to the search for certainty and foundational truths outside of the classroom. Descartes grew up going to school and receiving a very traditional education. However, he felt that after this education, he was left with a lot more doubts and questions than he was with answers. And through methods of self-reflection and re-examining everything that he had been taught to be known to be true, he created a four-pronged method that he would then use to decide what we could know to be true and how to apply this as we seek self-discovery. René Descartes' method, which is often called the method of doubt, was a systematic way of thinking that aimed to reach certain knowledge, aimed to declare what we could know to be certainly true. His process can be broken down into four simple steps. The first being to doubt everything. He believed that to find absolute certainty, we must doubt everything that we have been taught to be true. This means to question everything and the existence of everything around us. This was the only way that we could then come to the understanding of what is confirmed to be true and what is certain knowledge. The second step was to break things down into simpler parts. If you have something complex and you can't understand it, Descartes suggested that we break it down into a smaller, more manageable piece that allows you to tackle each part one by one, to truly and properly assess each part to decide along the way of this exploration if it can be certain knowledge. His third step was to work from simple ideas to more complex ones. After you've broken things down, you should start with the most simplest ideas that are easy to understand and the most certain pieces of knowledge, and from there, then build your way up to the more complex concepts. The fourth and final step is to review everything thoroughly after you have built an understanding. Go over everything to ensure that nothing was missed or overlooked and that your conclusions are sound, that you can back them up when talking about them with someone else. Through this method, Descartes believed that he achieved clear and undeniable truths, but you must start from a foundation of total and complete doubt. Through these dissections of doubts and truths revealed through his four-pronged method, Descartes could acquire more knowledge about himself, the world, and the philosophies surrounding him. He could take complex problems and break them down into small, manageable pieces to achieve what he believed to be specific and certain knowledge. His method, which doubts everything and removes subjective expertise from what we have been taught, analyzes the bigger picture without utilizing any information taught in school, and focuses on what you know to be accurate and what you can verify to be valid, which only furthered his understanding of the world he knew. It aided him as he sought more answers to self-discovery and indisputable truths. That's just a brief overview of the first text we will be looking at, what sparked my interest in that text, and why I wanted to focus on it today. Now, moving on to our second text, Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I'd like to give a brief overview for anyone who might not be familiar with it. Mary Shelley received an informal education from her father, which is very clear and necessary to understand as we analyze these two texts. Shelley received an informal education because she grew up in the 19th century, which is also when this book was published. During this time, women were prohibited from attending school in a formal, traditional classroom. Instead, her father taught her everything she would use to write this novel later in life. Something important to note is that Mary Shelley's father, William Godwin, was a prominent philosopher and political thinker who believed strongly in the importance of education. He thought that education was crucial not only for personal development, but also for social and political progress. This belief, which Shelley then reflected on in her works, is seen in the novel Frankenstein. This novel focuses on a young scientist, Victor Frankenstein, who becomes consumed by the idea of creating life and successfully creates a terrifying monster from dead body parts. In this novel, Victor also receives a traditional education. In the novel, Victor seeks a higher education, which is illustrated by his attendance at the University of Ingolstadt in Germany. By sending Victor to receive higher education so that way he can reach his ultimate goal of creating life, Shelley explores the importance of education. Sending Victor to attend school reflects Shelley's idea that education is important as you explore your self-identity and self-discovery, and that there is always something more to learn from receiving more education. This is very obviously portrayed in the fact that Victor attends a higher university far from home so he can ultimately learn more later in the novel and reach his goal of creating life. Not only is education important, but it is also where Descartes' novel and Shelley's novel differ. What's very important to note is that Descartes' novel focuses on doubt and exploring doubt after you've received an education, and really exploring what we can honestly know to be true. And is it just true because it's taught in a classroom? Meanwhile, in Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, Victor's education and self-discovery are not rooted in doubt. His journey was driven by the creation of life and its consequences that then followed. But it is very clear that when you compare these two texts, Shelley does not believe that there is any doubt behind a formal education. Meanwhile, Descartes does feel that just because it was taught to us in a classroom, we cannot know it to be true. However, in Frankenstein, Victor criticizes the books assigned to him and chooses to read prohibited books instead. Now, Victor is a fictional character, and Mary Shelley is the author and creator of Victor. So let's analyze. What does it mean that Shelley chose to have Victor read books that were prohibited? Victor's choice to read prohibited books is actually an illustration of the dangerous pursuit of knowledge. It alludes to the idea that there are some concepts to learn that may be too dangerous for humans to understand or even possess. And when looking at Victor, these books that he reads lead him down a path of obsession. He becomes consumed by the idea of creating life, about infusing life into a human being. He seeks to overcome the natural limits of life and death by creating this monster, and I think that it is really important that this forbidden knowledge, as illustrated in these prohibited books, can be seen as a metaphor for the dangers of overreaching ambition, or maybe exploring too far beyond our reach, perhaps even letting it get out of our own control. This reflects the power of traditional education. Mary Shelley almost hinted that while education is essential in our process of self-discovery, some things should be left alone. Through this, Shelley explores how Victor was driven by and ultimately overcome by his curiosity and need or desire to create life. Conversely, in Discourse on the Method, Descartes does not believe in the power of traditional education. He states that after finishing his schooling, he felt bogged down by many doubts and errors. His education, while it was the launching point of his self-discovery, almost forced him to re-examine what he had been taught and to look back on what he knew. Instead, he believes self-discovery started by dissecting and breaking apart your formal education, to break it into the smallest pieces and then rebuild upon after you've acquired certain knowledge. When looking at Shelley's exploration of formal education, it seems that Descartes and Shelley's opinions on traditional education are similar to night and day. They are polar opposites. At the same time, they both believe that conventional education, yes, is your launching point, but they have varying perspectives on it. Descartes doesn't believe in its power. Shelley, as seen through sending Victor to learn at other universities and having him read prohibited books, believes a formal education holds so much power in discovering who you are. Shelley believes the end of one's formal education is a start to self-discovery. Once one has acquired as much knowledge as possible, they can start looking at themselves and what they've learned to discover who they are. Formal education is needed, almost like a stepping stone in self-discovery. Descartes' and Shelley's different views about the power of education are rooted in the distinction between the self and the other. The self refers to your identity, actions, and who you are. The other is everyone or everything that is not you. Different people, cultures, perspectives, and things that are seen as distinct from you or society. When comparing the two texts, it is clear that Descartes represents the self. His findings are for self-reflection, for him to look back on who he is and what his education has taught him about who he is. His ability to self-reflect emphasizes that there is a foundation of knowledge found through thought and reflection. In his method of doubt, he realizes that to doubt, he must exist to perform that doubt. This leads to the conclusion that his existence as a thinking being is undeniable. The self represents a thinking subject, someone whose very act of doubting or thinking proves their existence, which is what Descartes does. His doubting reflection then proves his existence. He's created certain knowledge behind the fact that he exists. Descartes also represents the self as a seeker of certainty. He advocates for methodical doubt. He then strips away from all false beliefs to arrive at certain truths. In this sense, the self is someone who exercises reason and can use critical thinking to examine their beliefs and rationally understand the world. The self is portrayed as someone who pursues truth and wants to know what can be confirmed to be accurate, and sets aside these ideas that we've been taught and just accept to be correct, that we want truth with certainty. Meanwhile, Shelley and Victor's character represent the other because society sees them as outcasts. Shelley is seen as an outcast in the period that she grew up in because she is a woman. She was not allowed a formal education since they did not have many rights back then. Victor is seen as an outcast because throughout the novel, he becomes increasingly more isolated from the world. He is so focused on creating life that he isolates himself from his family and friends and the social norms that govern human relationships. Victor no longer seeks company from others, and he is often in his apartment reading and learning how to create life from his own two hands and the knowledge he's acquired. Through this isolation, he removes any ability to detect or explore doubt because he lets his creation become all-consuming. After examining the power of knowledge and the different educations that Descartes and Shelley received, it is safe to say that knowledge is, in fact, power. Without knowledge, Descartes would not have created his method and would not have been able to arrive at certain truths, and Shelley would not have been able to write the book and would not have been able to create Victor, who used knowledge to make his monster. Descartes and Shelley, as portrayed through Victor, have a desire for more knowledge, whether it is an untraditional way and outside of the classroom and through self-reflection, or whether it is going back to school and continuing to learn more. It is evident that both authors do have a desire for more knowledge. They want to explore the world and themselves personally. Descartes is kept in a state of questioning, bringing him closer to being truly aware of what is objectively known and subjectively believed. Descartes can reflect on his learning since he can reason and think independently of his school lessons and books. His education experience led him to objectively reflect on what he has learned and question its validity. In Shelley's novel, neither she nor Victor reflect or even doubt what they have been known to be true. They are confident in what was taught in a classroom or what is read in books. This is rooted in the fact that Shelley's novel was influenced by Romanticism, which often emphasized the power of the individual and the pursuit of knowledge and innovation. Victor has this romantic ideal of transcending human limitations and challenging nature and societal conventions. The lack of doubt towards education that Shelley portrays in this novel ends up showing the dangers of unchecked ambition and the failure to consider broader consequences. While we've been examining the differences between these two novels and the different approaches they take towards self-discovery and different approaches towards traditional education, it is important to note that they both explore themes of leaving home. Shelley did not leave her home growing up and did not experience self-discovery in a new place, but explores this theme by having Victor leave home and go study at a university far from home. He becomes engulfed in himself and his studies. The self-discovery process that Victor goes through while away would not have been possible if he had never left. Living in a new area and actively spending time gaining more knowledge allows him to change from who he was before he left. Similarly, Descartes' text explores the theme of leaving home because he leaves from France and goes to the Netherlands, and while there, explores the validity of everything that he has been taught. He examines his doubt parallel to what he was taught in school through getting away from his education and simultaneously getting away from France. This helps further analyze his doubts while also evaluating what we consider to be absolute truths. This is something that he would not have been privileged to do had he not been able to get away from his education and his town. Overall, Descartes and Mary Shelley explore how formal education can or cannot shape self-discovery. They do take different perspectives on the matter, with Shelley believing a formal education is an important foundation, and Descartes questioning the validity and reliability of formal education. It is clear the power of knowledge does guide these individuals through their respective journeys. Their lessons and ideas do ultimately converge, which offer caution to avoid getting caught up in an idea without deep reflection on the foundational truths. Shelley emphasizes how knowledge is important as it spurs Victor forward and to try something with groundbreaking potential with glaring mistakes resulting from an absence of self-awareness. And with Descartes, we see a slow, methodical deconstruction of educational teachings that while it shows slow progress, it does result in an overall greater good. In the end, an important takeaway from the comparisons of these two novels in the stances that they take on the importance of traditional versus non-traditional education is that both are valuable to Shelley and Descartes as both harness their hard-earned knowledge. Whether it be gathered outside of the classroom through doubt or failure, they both continue the search for who they are relative to the worlds around them. Self-discovery is vital to who we are, and seeking more information about our existence and where we come from is necessary to achieve such awareness. We can discover who we are through discussions, explorations, and searching for knowledge. Acquiring knowledge varies from person to person and is also relative to what is around us. Using all resources and looking at them from all angles is deeply influenced by what is personally believed to be true and with what regard we hold our education. Thank you so much for joining me today. I'm so glad that you were eager to listen to this podcast. Becoming You, the Self-Discovery Podcast, has been a true reflection of the growth that individuals take, and I felt that examining these two texts was a perfect way to look at how education and outside influences can influence our own self-discovery. Thank you all, and see you next week.